but could you please clarify what you mean?
I'd like to build on Jarvis's comment.
It was a really big measure of how they were going and how they were actually interpreting.
Probably trusting the children, I guess.
There's been international concern for many years about the misalignment between what we know about early adolescence and what's happening in the classrooms. Now, Jacqueline Eccles has got an abundance of research which shows that as the students progress through the schools, the pedagogy doesn't change to adjust. We know that early adolescents and adolescents like to talk. They like to talk to each other and learn. They like novelty and they like challenge. Many early adolescents and adolescents complain that as they go into those secondary schools and intermediates that their voice gets lost. And this is confirmed by research by Good and Brophy, who have said that as students go through their schooling years, there's less and less time for questions, and the learners become more and more passive in their learning. And this is a big concern, particularly as the New Zealand curriculum document is advocating active, competent learners. Students learning to talk to each other, cooperative learning is a big key, and the fact that, of course, we're wanting learners to become critical and analytical thinkers.
Show the history of
the first stage of the Paideia method is to ensure that there is very rich amount of domain knowledge that the students have. People like Pat Alexander and Michael Young are currently advocating a return to the importance of the domain knowledge.
Maybe with inquiry there's an emphasis on sort of the kid, you sort of give them a topic, an infertile question topic, and then they will go and find what it's about, sort of thing. And I think with Paideia it's really important with that first didactic stage. You have to sort of set a sort of a framework with those ideas, and then they can sort of take ownership, and then obviously in this framework, and then it can go from there.
Do you think it was a disaster that they got stuck in the doldrums?
A big part is for the teachers to think through an appropriate topic which is underpinned by one of Adler's 6 big ideas. Now, the teachers who came along to our professional development days took ages to come up with appropriate topics. I think they were really surprised, and we were surprised as well, how difficult it is to come up with a topic that is ambiguous and controversial and provocative. So in the classrooms where the teachers had absolutely put that time and energy into coming up with a big enough idea and question, the outcome in the seminar paid off. We did have some research.
I found I had to really introduce those sentence starters that we had seen in the training and drive them home to them. These are the sorts of ways you could start your statements.
I was sort of modelling how to use the language. I had, I'd like to challenge that because, and I had a whole lot, and I sort of said, try and use 3 of these in your writing.
I had to make some charts up with and put all those sentence starters on the chart, and we had to go over those quite a few times before they really understood it was something quite different to just chatting.
We wondered whether having opportunity to participate online learning would increase that opportunity for academic learning time. And we found that to be true because when we interviewed the students, they told us that they had time to think, and the learning becomes visible. So they are seeing what the other students are saying, and we found, and the students told us, that reading what each other students had to say helped them to develop the skills of critical and analytical thinking tremendously.
One thing they really liked about it was that they had time to think on the Moodle. Yeah. They had time to gather their thoughts and think about what they're going to say, and I think when you're in the classroom you don't give them enough time to do that generally.
My really quiet kids who, I guess when you're teaching normally you don't know if they're actually fully engaged or if they're actually understanding, but this was so awesome about it because they would actually go away and think about it, and they would bring up stuff people had talked about, what they're built on, and that was really awesome to see.
Some of the quieter ones who generally maybe don't speak as much were more confident in the seminar after, posting their thoughts on Moodle and having time to think, you know, they were more willing to express their ideas.
That got the boys engaged, and then when it came to the discussion, they were actually contributed quite a lot and were quite willing to interact with the people because they've already interacted on the computer, which is where they're confident. So it was really good to see them transfer that skill.
We really went through that beforehand about how you use Moodle and how to use it appropriately. And then if they did kind of write just like a random comment like, yes, I agree, I'd kind of put a link in to say, can you explain further? You know, can you justify what you're trying to say? You know, so really promoted it that way. And yeah, they found it, you know, they were really into the Moodle. We'd never done anything like that before, and they were so excited to use it. They wanted to Moodle all the time.
The coming out of the cave could be like coming out of society as a part.
The boy-girl distinction is very strong in my class, and possibly a racial one as well. But the one that I most noticed breaking down was the boy-girl distinction, in that boys were, particularly in Moodle, prepared to communicate with the girls, and I'm hoping, it's early days yet, but I'm hoping that it might encourage some of those boys to see them as the intellectual equal of the girls, which I don't think happens at the moment.
Because of this seminar, they're constantly collaborating with their ideas, they're interacting you know, on Moodle, they're interacting in the classroom, and I suppose it's not that formal group situation, but I think they actually interacted a lot more doing this than doing a little research inquiry and then coming back and presenting it.
Opening the seminar, I would just like to ask, can anyone think?
And it was very interesting in the seminar, I thought, because I saw that they were actually quite reliant on me, because they were constantly, they'd say something and they'd look at me for sort of that affirmation that they were saying the right thing. And so I wasn't saying much, but I noticed I was yes, you know, like always encouraging them. And I think because I do that all the time, they're constantly looking for it. So I think in the next one, it's going to be, don't talk to me, talk to each other. I mean, they added and challenged and all of that, but it was, I disagree with that because, and I was like, you know, and so it was that constant affirmation, yeah.
I guess one of the things that I'm having to develop and I'm having to learn is to just stand back a little, give them time. I found it really difficult to relinquish some of that control, perhaps, in that I was terrified they weren't going to say anything. And so sometimes I found myself jumping in way too frequently.
I can just step right out of it, and I've got a much clearer understanding of how they're actually processing their thinking than I did before. I've always, being an ESOL teacher, I've always given them a lot of wait time, but I never really looked at their thought, you know, how they were thinking, and being able to step back and just watch the interaction has been amazingly liberating for me.
It's just a really enriching process which really gets kids to critically think and to sort of take ownership of their own learning. My first seminar was, I was struggling really to encourage the children to think beyond what they could see literally. The text was a cartoon, and they were looking at the cartoon in a very literal sense. And with all the work that we had done, I was hoping that they would achieve slightly higher levels of thinking, or deeper levels of thinking, if you like. And then one boy, a Samoan boy, who doesn't usually have a lot to say, suddenly said, I think this is a matter that those characters are chasing their dreams. And it was a much more conceptual statement than what we'd ever encountered before.
When we interviewed the students after the project, they also had a very strong sense of community. So they saw other students in the classroom as being experts and being able to contribute to their own learning and growth as much as they saw the teacher as that person being able to do that.
Word voice that he was actually a male, but